Do you ever just stumble upon a material that is just the most beautiful material you have ever seen in your entire life? You have absolutely no clue what you would ever do with said material, except there is simply no question, you must buy it. Literally every craftsperson ever. That is exactly what happened to me when I was out on a mission on Goldhawk Road trying to find one specific fabric for one specific project, and I ended up coming home with these embroidered velvets instead, and honestly, I have no regrets, except now I am tasked with the challenge of trying to find something to do with said velvets, because if there's one crafting philosophy that I have, it is that the good things should be used. There's no point in holding on to a good material for the someday when I will use it. Because if we don't seize the things that capture our attention in the moment will probably pass and then something else will happen and we will simply never use them. So I went into a fabric store for a plain white cotton and I came out with 2 embroidered velvets and a whole lot of personal questions. I thought that maybe I could use these velvets as an opportunity to intellectualize, nay, overanalyze my personal style, my wardrobe, to get my head around what specifically attracts my eye to a pattern or texture or silhouette or cut. How do we actually define what are the materials that deeply align with our personal tastes that we will actually use when we buy them? Versus, the materials that we just think are beautiful, but we actually realistically might not ever use them. So the answer is going to be different for every person, and I want to know the answer in regards to my own work and my own tastes and my own aesthetic. This is a project I've been meaning to do actually for a long time, and I've spent the last couple of weeks pondering around the internet, gathering some images, things that inspire me, particularly in regards to clothing, but also around colors and textures and fabrics and just general vibe. We all have different mixing pots of tastes and interests. So I'm gonna break them down and then I'm going to, through looking at all my little pods, draw some connections to see where the through lines are. And I'm so grateful that mood boarding app Milanote is actually sponsoring this video, because Milanote is an app that I've been using for years to do my own mood boarding and to organize my projects. It is completely free to download, and I'm so excited to share it with you because this, I think, is something that will really help a lot of you, especially if you're trying to work through and define your personal taste. There are over 100 different templates that you can use to get started on Milanote if you want to have that preset framework for you. But personally, I love starting with a completely blank board because this just gives me the ability to drag things around and just visualize things in whatever way that the vibe of the project is going. There's a plugin that you can attach to your browser. So with every image that I hover my mouse over, it will have this little Milanote save button that I can just, save to wardrobe. And it will just put it for me straight in this unsorted tab so that I can drag it wherever I want once I get back into Milanote. It retains the original source from where I got the image. So, that's been super useful. So I'm just gonna start dragging some things on my board. I can resize things, which is super nice. And I'm adding all sorts of things, from garments that I found on sites that I really enjoy, from brands that I would both buy from, as well as, the occasional fast fashion brand that I wouldn't necessarily buy from, but that it's an interesting silhouette and I don't have to buy it. I can just harvest the inspiration from it. So that's been really helpful. I'm just kind of dragging everything on my board. I also love that you have the ability to completely resize your boards. You can literally just pinch it in, pinch it out. If you need more space, you just keep pinching out and it gives you more space. I'm making a Milanote.
Yeah! Oh, I see. With the shapes of the buildings and then the skirt embroidery, that all kind of
yeah, isn't it cool?
Together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Listen, Gothic architecture, my weakness. Okay, so what I think I'm actually going to do is I want to keep my main board sort of like a quick reference of a couple of images, a couple of color swatches, a couple of reference textures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subboard, and I'm going to call this Moods. On this subboard, I'm going to dump all of my images, and I can pull out things that, if there's a particular image that I want to retain for my quick reference board. So in the Moods board, I'm going to start delineating things by all the different aesthetics, I should say, that I find myself drawn to. Very few of us can actually pin ourselves down into a cottagecore or a goth. We all have so many different sides to us and such wide varieties of taste. So of course I have my Victorian aesthetic. I'm also gonna put down dark cottagecore. So dark cottagecore over here, we'll put Victorian over here. Obviously we have to have a category for witchy. We'll also have a category for modern dark academia. And really just puzzling things together however you see fit. This will be probably a work in progress for a while, but I realize I have a lot more subcategories of sub-aesthetic than I thought I did. However, there is definitely a very strong through line here. There are some common themes, and all of them together spell Bernadette style. I've pulled out a couple of words that I think succinctly describe what's going on. So there's definitely a strong presence of silhouette in all of them, regardless of whether it is a Victorian dress or a goth dress or a cottagecore blouse or a medieval gown. They all have very strong silhouettes to them and very specific silhouettes. And that is something I feel like is quite important to the clothes that I wear. So yeah, that's definitely something that I learned through looking at this. I also, of course, have a strong affinity towards craftsmanship. If there is clear handwork in a garment, whether it's embroidery or pleating or interesting weaves in the fabric or tailoring, of course, there's definitely a lot of embroidery, a lot of florals going on here. Work that you can see in a garment, that is definitely something I'm into. As well as sustainability. That is like the final, overarching theme of the clothes that I wear, is that it has to be from a brand that is working small scale sustainably or secondhand or made by me. So those, I think, are the primary themes of my wardrobe. We've got moods here, we've got texture. Oh, color! Oh, I've never tried the color feature before. This is really cool. Okay. Oh, I can eyedropper. Yo! This is a new feature that I didn't know Milanote had. Well, I knew they had it, but I didn't know where it was, and I'd never played with it before. So you can drag color swatches on. I've referenced a few images as well of colors that feel like they work well together. Ooh, and it gives you oh my god, it gives you the hex code and the name of the color. I'm not even sure if that's my favorite shade of blue, but that's definitely my favorite name of a shade of blue. So anyway, now that I have a much more clear idea, not just of my aesthetic psychology, I suppose, but also of where I would like to go with this particular project. So I'm gonna head into the drawing tool here and see if I can just do a little bit of preliminary sketching to test out my ideas. Now, the trick will be getting a Victorian silhouette out of a straight length of fabric, because I don't think I have quite enough to cut a full walking skirt out of. There's a lot of long and flowing skirts, which I think could be a really excellent opportunity to show off the full pattern of the fabric. This is, now that I think about it, definitely a strategy that was used historically in order to show off your fantastically expensive silks in the past. In fact, to the point where in the 18th century in court dress, you were literally just stitching together entire panels of fabric in your giant pannier gowns, because you're like, here, have a look at my very pretty fabric. So I think I might do something along the lines of that. That would really give me the opportunity to really display the full length of the fabric, as well as to utilize the borders of the fabric, because the borders are just stunning. So I think they definitely have to be skirts. And there's also the issue that I want to use it up to down. Like, technically we're cutting these skirts the wrong way around, because when you cut clothes for the body, you want to use the length along the selvage of the garment as the length of the body, because that's technically the direction that the fabric is strongest. However, that is kind of where the beauty of the fabric lies. The border is at the bottom of the selvage, which is going to be a little weird, but I think we have to just take advantage of the design. The black one that I have has some slightly more gothic motifs. It's got these long pointed arches in them. So I might actually do a more Victorian silhouette for that one. I won't have enough fabric to cut the panels of a walking skirt like that. And I don't think I really want to, because the panels of a walking skirt curve at the hem, so it wouldn't quite be even with the border. So I think I will have to cheat the cutting of this a little bit. And I might be able to get away with just putting darts in the front here, just to kind of mimic the front seams of a walking skirt. And then the rest of the fabric, I might just be able to get away with pleating at the side seams and at the back to create a little bit of a bustle effect. And then I'll have my nice little border, and I'll add a waistband. And I think that could work. Where I'm gonna put the pockets in this, that's a completely different story, but we'll find out. For the other lighter blue one, that one can be a bit more whimsical, a little more cottagecore. I kind of wanna have a little play with the drape on that one because I do want one of the skirts to be a little shorter, so I'll have my border along there. I might have to do some funny things with the top. Maybe I'll make a nice fancy waistband. Maybe I'll do a wider waistband on here because I do want them to be slightly different. Almost comes up like mid-rib-ish. That could be kind of fun. And then once again, we are going to have to play with the straight length of it and not do any paneled cutting, so I might have to do some. I'm not gonna make this quite as Victorian shaped as the other. What I might be able to do is fold the fabric down, in which case, ooh, I could make a little, there could be like a pocket in the front. Interesting. Okay, so this could be kind of more of like a little apron dress. Yeah, I definitely wanna have a play with that one and see where we go. Anyway, I love Milanote. I hope you go forth and take advantage of this chance to check it out. It is completely free to download. And Milanote is also great for collaboration if you work on a team or with other artists or other creators. Milanote, I have found so far to be the best app to really help me get my head around a project. I've used Milanote for collaborative projects so often in the past amongst production teams that I've worked on, just in having the ability to work so visually and everyone can kind of just work on one space together. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. So anyway, there's a link in the description if you would like to go forth and check out Milanote. I do so hope you love it as much as I do. It's time to go ahead and start making up some skirts. So I decided I wanted to create an additional challenge for this project in trying to make it as zero waste as possible. Given, of course, that these fabrics are just so beautiful, I don't want to waste any of them. This should be fairly easy enough for a skirt project, but since the blue velvet skirt was going to be shorter, I did need to take some of that width off. But rather than cutting it, I tried out my little folding idea, folding it over at the top to create that little pouch pocket at the front. The fabric has a lovely plain velvet border at the top, which I thought could be perfect for that wide waistband I had planned. And I promptly decided that I wanted a break from the complicated bits and proceeded to do some hemming. The bottom edge has a much narrower border, which I just turned up and finished off with a little bit of lace. The remaining length in the back is just getting pleated up so that the skirt sits smoothly across the front but has a little bustle effect in the back. This is the part I've been procrastinating this whole time because this is the part where I commit to this very unusual design. I think we just have to cut. Okay, I think we're gonna do this. I've decided that the folded pocket detail along with the pleats in the back was going to be too bulky, and I didn't want to pleat the waistband bit as well. So I've just cut away the upper border and excess width along the back sides and just set these aside for later. Yes, this would have been easier to do before I pleated it, but I wanted to be sure that I was getting all the fabric and all the pleats in exactly the right place, and of course that this idea would work in the first place before I for sure committed to this design through the fatal act of cutting. Okay. I've got a very nice healthy square fabric, which I will also have on the other side as well. So we've got front waistband. Let me do the other side first. So here's what we're working with. We've got this little front bit remaining of this, which has been kept on, and this forms this front pocket here. I will be stitching up these side seams here just to close that off. And then I have my little front pocket, which is very exciting. I have cut off this area because this gets all pleated up and there's just not going to be an easy way to do that cleanly. I will just stitch on another half of the waistband here. I don't need to worry about the pocket over here. And I've got two very nice clean squares of this embroidery material left over to do with as I please. This top bit is definitely getting cut off and made up into the other waistband bits for the back. I do need to interline this with something because right now it's very floppy and it is not going to hold up very well. I have actually recently discovered some extra little scraps of this cotton twill canvas here, which I don't know where this came from, and I don't seem to have any more of this, but this is exactly what I need for this, and I enjoy using up scraps. So I think I might try and interline some of this stiffer cotton canvas into this waistband here and see if there's a way to just get it to sit nice and flat and smoothly without there being any stitching coming through here. In case you are wondering, no, I did not pre-plan this construction process literally at all. I'm really just winging the construction as I go and taking on the constructional steps as they arise. It's kind of a refreshing way to work, a little bit stressful, but also, you know, no thoughts, just vibes. Yeah, that's much smoother. Okay. Onward. I've cut the plain border off of one of my remaining squares to add that as the smooth waistband on either side of the back halves, but I'm just interlining these first before I put them in just to make my life a little bit easier. The question now, though, is I have two really great squares of embroidered material that are perfectly usable. I think I might have just enough for a little laced bodice, and I've decided to draft one up. This does complicate the zero waist challenge slightly, since bodices involve lots of curves which inevitably create awkward scraps, but I do still have straps and bindings and plackets and just little details and bits to take into consideration, so I'm hoping that I will be able to essentially quilt together even the tiniest scraps to make all of these happen. Otherwise, of course, I will just have to borrow some fabric from my own stash, because aside from these squares, I don't have anything else left over. This is going to be a fairly lightweight bodice, so I'm just lining it in some stiff coutil to give it some body, but will otherwise leave it mostly unstiffened and unboned. I've also decided to tear apart the mock-up I made for this, since it was a pretty close fit without needing substantial alterations, and I'm adding those muslin pieces in as an additional interlining. This doesn't really functionally do anything except maybe add the smallest bit of thickness, but mostly it just gives my mock-up pieces a useful place to go that isn't just in the scrap drawer. I tend to reuse my mock-up pieces for other smaller mock-ups, but bodices tend to be really tricky since the pieces are really small and cut on specific grain lines, so this is just a bit less waste. Historically, it's also believed that mock-ups were used as linings for the actual garments, or the linings were made up and fit to the body to test the fit before being put into the final garment, which is a practice I've actually employed myself very much in the past, to great success, but as you can see, this mock-up isn't really a precise match to the shapes, and a lot of it was cut without seam allowances to gauge the edge positions, so that is not really practical in this sense, and it will just remain an interlining. I have some extra silk taffeta left over from the Moraine coat, which I've decided to use as a lining for this bodice. I did decide to add two little strips of bone to the front seams of the bodice. I find that even if you want the feeling of a soft bodice, adding stays to the front seams doesn't feel any different, but it does wonders in smoothing the line from bust to waist, which serves to create a much more corseted illusion. I've also incidentally used this in bodices and waistcoats when I want a more corseted look without wearing a full corset, so, you know, handy tip if you want. Once that is all done, I can lay the lining over the guts and then finish off the edges with strips of velvet binding that I cut from the other plain blue border that wasn't being used for the blue skirt waistband. And with only the eyelets left to do on the bodice, I'm just going to set that aside for now and focus on these skirts, which I am supposed to be working on for this project. I really do only have bits and pieces left, so I am indeed puzzling together a placket from the remaining bodice scraps, which, incidentally, I also did not film any of the inserting into the skirt, but, you know, imagine that happens, because it does. The waistband will require a bit of shaping since it is so wide, so I'm just attaching the back pieces to the skirt part before marking where the side seams need to close for a smooth fit, and then just stitching those up last. Time to get started on the second skirt, which I will be constructing with a more Victorian influence. While I have a flat length of material, I'm just going to take care of all the hem tasks so that it's easier to work with. I folded a little bit of cord into the hem just as I've turned it up so that the edge is given a little bit of stiffness and shape, and I'm also adding a wide tarlatan facing behind the border to give the skirt a little bit more body and flair. A lot of Victorian skirts are lined or at least faced at the hem with this tarlatan, this stiffened cotton gauze, so this will just help to give the skirt a little bit more of that Victorian movement and behavior. Then over the top of this, I am adding a wide wool hem braid, which will just peek out for a few millimeters behind the cord. This braid actually sits a little bit lower than the cord so that it hits the ground first and hopefully will protect the velvet corded edge from wearing down, which will wear down a lot faster than this wool will. The wool hem braid is, of course, not integral to the skirt itself. It is a lot cheaper, so it can be ripped out and replaced as it wears. So I'm also not being that finicky with these stitches because, in theory, they will have to come out at some point. I've used the same smooth front and pleated back strategy on the black skirt as the blue, so with the hems finished, I can go ahead and close up the back seams of both skirts. I'm cutting a waistband for the black skirt using some of the plain black velvet I harvested from the border and interlining this with some black taffeta for extra stiffness. Then I made some Victorian-style pockets, since this one doesn't have the pouch configuration, and of course, one must always have pockets. I do have multiple walkthroughs of these Victorian-style pockets in previous walking skirt videos, which I shall link roundabout somewhere on the screen if you wish to go into more detail on these. I've stayed true to my plan of not actually cutting into the length of the fabric in order to preserve as much of it as possible. But in order to create the illusion of the shaped Victorian skirt, I have indeed added those two long darts at the side fronts, as well as some deep pleats where the side seams should in theory go. So aside from the front darts, I didn't really want to take any more out of the skirt, so they're just pleats. At the inside fold of these pleats, though, is where I will split the fabric to add in the pockets. So they're still nice and tucked away inside the pleats, even if they're not set into actual seams. This will, in theory, put more stress on the fabric, which is why the Victorian pocket engineering is extra important here. The suspension strap built into these will help the weight of the pocket sit at the waistband rather than stressing the skirt fabric, which I just love. I don't understand why this isn't done nowadays. It's so ingenious. Then I can stitch on the waistband, making sure to trap those pocket straps in good and tight. I prepared 2 linings out of just some simple pleated rectangles for both skirts. This will just help to protect all the inner seams and inner constructional bits, as well as making these skirts much more comfortable to wear, especially against that rough tarlatan on the long black skirt. Then I stitched these up and hemmed them, then put them in. The pleated edges of the skirts are thick. So before I sew in the waistband lining to finish them off, I'm just first compressing these edges as tightly as I can get them to go, just by overcasting them tightly with some very strong doubled silk buttonhole twist. With some finishing closures, namely the skirt hooks at the waistband for the skirts and many eyelets for the bodice, arranged in a spiral lacing configuration for ultimate historical appeal, I am suddenly in possession of 3 new garments. I'm so pleased with this project. I got to work with such incredibly gorgeous materials. It is not every day that you get to find something that just sings to your eyes. Every minute that you're working on a project just makes the whole project so much more enjoyable. I have a very strong philosophy in my crafting work. I know this is something that plagues a lot of craftspeople, in that you find a material that is so beautiful. Maybe it's expensive, maybe it's precious, maybe it's one of a kind, and it's like, how can you possibly use this? How can you spoil the potential opportunity of this material? This is something that I really try hard to work against in my craft, because what I've found over the years is that you will continually find beautiful materials. There will always be a new fascination, a new dream project, and our list of immediate fascinations is continually changing. I have bought fabrics that I've just been so in love with over the years, and they sit in my fabric stash, and I never have the perfect project to use them for. And then years later I'll dig them up and think, oh, this is so me in a different era of my life, but it's not really me anymore. And thus I've lost the opportunity to potentially make something that I would really love and really wear. So I now make it a point, whenever I have beautiful materials, whether it's a fabric or a garment or a piece of houseware or whatever it is, if I have something that I really love, I'm just gonna use it, because this era of my life is probably finite. I will get to use and enjoy the thing during the period in my life when I will get most value out of it. So this is your sign to go forth and try something with the really cool, beautiful material that you've been putting off doing something with. They're meant to be used by you right now when you feel it is the most beautiful. A huge thank you to all of our incredible patrons who support this channel and allow whimsical projects like this where there is no plan. We're just gonna do some experimentation and see what the outcome is. I would love if you would consider joining and supporting over there if any of these videos have given you any inspiration or value in your life and you have the means to do so. And if not, that's totally cool. You absolutely support this channel simply by watching to the end, as you have done. We love you for that. If you are following along in real time, the next video that's coming out is going to be full of shenanigans. I am going to go get started on my next sewing projects, which will probably involve yet another Milanote board, so do go forth and check that out, link in the description if you felt like giving that a try, and I shall see you back here very soon. Over one piece of hay. Oh my god. You silly girls. Oh my god. Myra. Hey.